Hi class, this is lesson 14 for course 2. This is problems about parts of a whole and simple probability. Okay, so we're going to talk about two separate things that are sort of related. Parts of a whole problems. Okay, so we're going to talk about parts of a whole group or a whole item, and what we're going to end up with is an equation that looks like part plus part equals whole. Okay, and this is extremely important down here. Parts can be fractions or percents. They can also, so fractions, like 1/4, and percents like 25%. Those would be equivalents, 1/4 and 25%. But the whole, when we're looking for the whole amount, we're going to add up to either 1 or 100%. Okay, so a part plus a part is going to equal the whole, and the whole has to equal 1 or 100%. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple sample problems. Let's see if I can grab onto that. There we go. Okay, here's problem number 1. I want you to write this in your notes. We have 1/4 of the students ate breakfast. What fraction of the students did not eat breakfast? Okay, so here's the first thing that I'm going to point out to you. This 1/4 of the students ate breakfast, and the question is what fraction of the students did not eat breakfast. Okay, pay very close attention to the problems, looking at whether the information they give you is the same or different as the question that they ask. Okay, so I'm going to draw a picture here. So if I represent all of the students as a circle, if 1/4 of the students ate breakfast, and I'll color in this, that'll be 1 out of 4. Remember, the denominator tells you how many equal groups you have, so I needed to cut my circle into 4 equal groups. The numerator tells me that I have 1 of those equal groups. So the blue area is the students that ate breakfast. Okay. So that means the white area is the did not eat breakfast. Okay, so what fraction is represented there? Well, it's still fourths, so my denominator has to be a 4. I'll put this here. Denominator has to be a 4. And how many are not shaded? 1, 2, 3 of them. So your answer would be 3/4. Now, if you want to do that as an equation, you would write the part 1/4 plus the unknown part. I'll call it n for did not eat. 1/4 plus n has to equal 1. So what number do you have to put here so that you equal 1? Well, again, that would be 3/4. Okay, next example, we're going to talk about percents here. Please write this in your notebooks again. 32% of the citizens did not vote in the election. What percent of citizens did vote in the election? Okay, again, they tell us that we have 32% that did not vote, and we want the percent that did vote. Okay, so 32% of the people that didn't vote has to add with the number of citizens that did vote, and I'm going to use the variable c just for citizens, has to equal, remember that all of the citizens would equal 100%. Okay, and remember that anytime you're missing an add-end, you subtract. So we would end up with 100% minus 32%. What's that going to give us? Well, we'll have a percent. I'm going to borrow from there. So 10 minus 2 is 8, 9 minus 3 is 6. 68% did vote in the election. Okay. All right. Moving on to our next subject. probability. Probability is the likelihood that an event will occur. You will need to know this. Probability, the likelihood that an event will occur. Okay, so what event? What are we talking about? We'll get to that in just a minute. There's some math related with probability, and there's some rules. Probability has to always be between 0 and 1. Okay, we can write it as a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. But it will, the smallest it can ever be is 0, and the largest it can ever be is 1. And here's a little chart for you to write down in your notebook. And we're going to add some information in here. 0, if something is 0, has a likelihood of 0 that it will occur, this is never. Okay, if you get a 0 probability, it cannot occur. It's never going to happen. On the other end, though, if you get a 1, it's certain, or guaranteed, or it's definitely going to happen. And in the middle, if your probability is a half, or if it's 50%, or if it's 5/10, 0.5, that means that it's like halfway in the middle. It could happen or it couldn't, right? Could or could not happen. It's equally likely. Okay? Neither side is favored to win. Let's say it that way. Now, what happens here is that as we move from 1/2 to 0, the item, the probability, or the event gets less likely that it will occur. Okay, so as your percent decreases, the event is less likely to happen. And on the other side, as we get closer to 1, it's more likely to happen. Okay, so that's kind of how you read this chart. And basically, closer to 0, not real likely. Closer to half, it's equally likely. It might happen, it might not. Over by 1, it's certain to happen. It will absolutely happen. Okay, so how do we calculate probability of events? And again, this is one of those things that you will want to make sure that you know how to do. So the probability, and then we put parentheses around whatever event it is, and I'll show you examples of that here in just a second. But probability is going to be a fraction, and it's going to be represented as the number of favorable outcomes divided by the total number of possible outcomes. Okay, so favorable outcomes match up with the event in question. Okay, so this and this have to match. That's where you get whatever event it is, that's the favorable outcomes. Okay, so make sure you have that in your notes. Make sure it's starred. I would try to memorize it. Let's do some examples. Okay, so I copied that equation here onto each of these next pages. You don't have to write it again. It's just so that we have it to refer back to. So here's the problem. Please write this down. In a bag containing 4 red marbles, 3 blue marbles, and 3 white marbles, what is the probability of picking a red marble from the bag without looking? Okay, so we're going to draw a marble out of the bag. We need to calculate the probability of red. So remember up here we said the event is going to go in parentheses. That's what this is. P red means the probability of the red marble. So number of favorable outcomes, right, the fraction bar, number of favorable outcomes. Well, how many red marbles are there? Well, there's 4 red marbles, so I'm going to put 4 as my numerator. Now the total number of possible outcomes. How many total marbles are in the bag? There are 4 red, 3 blue, and 3 white. So this would be 4 plus 3 plus 3. And we're going to simplify that to 4 out of 4, 7, 10. Okay, now what's wrong with this fraction? 4/10. We can reduce it because 4 and 10 both have the factor of 2. So we're going to divide both of those by 2, and we are going to get 2/5 as a fraction. Okay, so we can leave it as a fraction, 2/5. 4/10 makes it easy to write the decimal, 0.4. And maybe you know that this is the same thing as 40%. Okay, you only need one of these. Only need one. Okay, so if maybe 2/5 you can't tell, maybe 0.4 you can tell a little bit better, and 40%, hopefully you know that that's close to half. 4/10 is close to half. So it's, if we go back to this chart, 4/10 would be like here. So it's a little less likely than likely, but it's close to maybe happening equally likely that you get a 4, or I mean a red, or not a red. Okay, so let's take a look at this example down here. What is the probability of getting a black marble? Okay, so we're going to work this example the exact same way. It's still in this bag containing 4 red, 3 blue, and 3 white marbles. So hopefully you remember 4 plus 3 plus 3 is 10. So the total outcomes, the total number of possible outcomes is 10. Well, how many black marbles are in our bag? Well, there are none. And whenever we have a fraction with 0 as a numerator, we just write 0. Okay, so how likely is it that we're going to get a black marble out of this bag? Well, it's never going to happen, right, if we go back to this chart, because there aren't any. So how are we going to get a black marble out of there? Okay, I'm going to flip the page here, and we're going to talk about one more example. I think I actually have 2 examples left. So again, I just copied this equation down, or the formula down. You don't have to write that again. But you're going to see problems like this. On a number cube, what is the probability of rolling a number less than 4? Okay, number cube just means a die. You know, the sides, you have a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, and a 6. So on any roll, you could get one of those numbers. Okay, so what is the probability of getting less than 4? Now, if I want less than 4, does that include the number 4? It does not. Okay, so how many numbers less than 4 would be favorable outcomes? Well, there's a 1, a 2, and a 3, so that's 3 numbers. 3 favorable outcomes, 3 numbers that would happen that are less than 4. How many total possible outcomes are there? Well, there are 6 sides. They all have different numbers, so there are 6 total. Now, what happens here in this fraction 3/6? 3 and 6 both have a factor in common, so I can divide both of them by 3, and I get 1/2. So the probability of getting less than 4 on any roll of the die would be half. So it's equally likely as unlikely that I would get a number less than 4. Okay, one last example for you. Again, the probability equation is just there. What is the probability of the spinner stopping on 3? Please draw this in your notes. Here is the diagram. We have a large spot of the circle as a 1, and then a 2 and a 3 on the other side. Notice these are not equal spaces, so our spinner is not fair. So we need to divide the 1 space into 2 1 spaces. So we're going to draw a line there, and then make this a 1, and then this is still a 1. Because now we have equal size groups, or our spinner's been divided evenly or equally. Okay, so what is the probability of getting a 3 when you spin? Probability of getting a 3. Well, how many 3 spots are on our spinner? 1. How many spots in total? 4. I can't reduce this fraction, so my answer is 1/4, which is not probably it's less likely than about half. So it's probably not going to happen. Probability of not a 3. Okay, so what does this mean? I want anything but a 3. So how many options are there that are not 3s? Well, there's 2 here and 1 there, so that's 3. Out of how many spaces total? 4. So the probability of not getting a 3 is 3/4. Now, when your probability sums to 1, you have complementary events, and you're going to want to write that down. Complementary events, the sum of the probabilities of the 2 events equals 1. So if we were to take these two, 1/4 plus 3/4, that's going to equal 4/4. Remember, when you add fractions, they have to have common denominators. And then we don't add the fraction, or the denominators, we add the numerators, not the denominators. 4/4 simplifies to 1. This is just like what we talked about at the beginning of this lesson. Part plus part has to equal the whole thing. Okay, that's what they're talking about there. The complementary events are going to sum to 1. So if you have a probability of 3, probability of not getting a 3 should end up with 1. Okay? Probability can be a difficult subject. Make sure you refer back to your notes when you answer some of the questions, and remember that I'm almost there to help you. Okay? So I will see you in class.